Many nonprofits subscribe to a system or a tool or pay for a service, and then they realize after some time that this tool is not for us. It's not meeting our expectations. We are investing so much, we're getting so little return. Many problems. Sometimes we get ourselves into a contract that's 1 year long or 2 years long, and then we realize why did we get ourselves into this situation? And then we try to find ways to fix that. To avoid this problem altogether, there are some questions that we need to ask before we subscribe to a system. If we are going with a system that, like a tool or a system that is fairly cost effective, we're just trying it out for a month or so, it's fine to try things out. It's fine to explore things. But if we're going for a system that we may use for the next 5 years, a system that we're looking to grow with us and to work with across departments, everybody uses it. We plan to use it for the long run. Then we need to make some analysis and learn and understand what we need, what our objectives are, and ask some serious questions before we actually make that big decision. I'll share these questions with you today. Some of these questions we actually ask after a nonprofit already. Like I implement Salesforce for nonprofits, and this video is not about Salesforce. It's generally about before you subscribe to any service, really, any software, before you get any software. So as part of any software implementation, we will always ask some of these questions, and probably all of these questions in the early stages. We call it a discovery stage. In the very early stages, we'll ask you a ton of questions. And some of these questions should have been asked internally. The nonprofit team should internally prepare these questions before we actually pay for the tool. When we ask these questions, quite often we find out that the nonprofit team do not know some of the answers. It's not like a correct or wrong answer, but just like, we're trying to learn about you. So when you come back to us saying like, we'll think about it, or maybe like we haven't thought much about this, or I'll get back to you on this, or I'll write an email with what you need. That's fine, but it makes it sound like we haven't thought much about this decision before we actually made it. So I'm going to share with you some questions that we will be asking in any discovery, so that you actually ask these questions and try to have them prepared and answered before you actually pay or subscribe to any service or system. So first question here is, what are our business needs? And I fall into this mistake sometimes myself. Like, I find the tool, it looks cool, it looks nice, it might actually address one of my problems, and I'm immediately I want to pay for it. Like right now, I want to get it. I want to use it. Like for bigger things, if it's a small thing, it's fine. But for bigger things, I need to actually resist that temptation and take a step back and ask, what are the business needs? The reason behind it, we'll talk some more about this. The reason behind it is that after we write down, not just think about it, because when you think about it, you just forget some of the important elements. But after we actually write down the list of needs that we have, we need a system that automates this, that takes out this manual work, that sends these emails, that gives us these reports and analytics. Like, we need to identify our pain points, our objectives, like the business needs, everything that we need and we expect from a system, and write it down. And we don't just do it or ask one person to do it, but it has to be collaborative, the team, the entire team. And if it's a bigger team or multiple teams or departments, then everybody needs to contribute to this, because usually I'm thinking about what I am facing, what I am seeing day to day, but another person sees things differently. So it needs to be some sort of collaborative effort to understand what we need, what our objectives are. After we identify that list of needs, we're going to look for a software or multiple different softwares. And what the software needs to do is that it needs to check that list. The software that checks most of these lists with the options to implement the rest of the list with additional tools or add on or something. That's the system that we need to use. So many amazing systems are there. This system is very good for that thing, and this other system is very good for that thing. It doesn't matter what the system is good at. Is that thing that it is good at, is this our need or not? Like, this is the biggest question of all time. Before we subscribe to anything, we must understand our business needs and then find the tool or a system that actually meets those business needs. Sometimes when we actually learn about these business needs, we might find out, for example, that we have different departments. So we have the programming department, and we have the fundraising department. We have finance, we have communications, we have, like all kinds of different teams. Sometimes it's not necessarily one thing. We might not just use one system, but we might use multiple. We might use one system for fundraising. We might use one system for programming. Sometimes it makes more sense to have just like the two of them in one system. So understanding the business needs helps with that decision. Another question that we should be asking is, what metrics are we trying to track and report on? And this is a big question, because the way, like usually many consultants and good developers like think about this very last thing. Like, let's like, all right, we need a system that does XYZ. Like we're good at this. We're gonna give you a system that does XYZ, and then we go through months of implementation. Now we have a system that's ready. It's live. It's great. Let's go. And then after that's all done, and then we use it for like 1 quarter or maybe for 1 year. And then at the end of the year, the leadership comes and says, we need a report that shows us how much donations we have raised this year, how many donors we've raised, we have spoken with this year, like how number of interactions, which of our fundraising campaigns was the most successful, which one was not successful. What are the sources of our donations? Did they come from our website? Did they come from offline, cash, in person? Did these donations come from a particular social media campaign? Like these are metrics questions. And when we ask, even though this happens at the very end, like the question itself, the request for a report happens at the very end, it's one of the very early questions that we should be asking. Like in a discovery meeting, in the very early stages of an implementation, I would ask, what is it that we need to report on? What type of analytics, what type of metrics that we eventually need? This affects pretty much everything. It affects the design. Like before even the design and before we start implementing a software, it affects the decision to go with the software or not. Like before we actually buy a software, we can ask them, after we use this system, we need it to give us the following metrics, 1, 2, 3, 4. Can this system give us these numbers? If the answer is yes, then this system works for us. If the answer is no, then it doesn't. And many systems are customizable, where they allow you to tailor and get you what you need. And these are the systems that we are looking for. So understanding what the metrics are, what we need, reverse engineering helps us very much choose the right system. And then during the implementation of the system, we can communicate these metrics early on, so that the consultant or the developer, they actually make sure that these are addressed and build the foundation for these metrics are in place. We also need to think early on. I'm moving to another point now. We need to think early on about the return on investment. And, like it sounds fancy, but, like the return and investment, what are we getting, or what are we expecting from the system? And how much are we spending? And the reason I'm like stressing on this point as well is because I mostly work with small nonprofits, and budget is a big thing. Like I shouldn't be looking at an amazing software. There is many amazing softwares out there. and many amazing software that help you get started for free or for a little bit of cost. But it's important to think after 1 year from now, after 5 years from now, or maybe right now we are only a team of 2 people or 3 people. So one software could offer us, like 3 free licenses. What's next? Let's say we grow. We are a nonprofit. We're not going to stay a small nonprofit forever. We're going to grow. We're going to add more people to our team, and we're going to add more data and workflows and everything. So everything is going to continue to grow. Today, we are doing fundraising only, but later we're going to do other things. We're going to do programming. We're going to do, maybe like we're doing programming now, but we are only using the system for programming and we're not using it for fundraising. So in the future, we're going to be using fundraising as well. So how much is it going to be? How much is it now to implement and use this system? And how much is it going to be after some time? So the return on investment, we will ask a few questions about the investment and then a few questions about the return. In terms of the investment, we'll ask, how much is the system right now? Now, if we're going to use fundraising only, how much does it cost? If we're going to add programming, how much will it cost? If we're going to add marketing, how much will it cost? If we are only a team of 7 people, now if we hire more people, how much would it cost? If we're going to, like right now we have a small database, we have only 10,000 rows or records, we have a couple of sheets. Once we have 10 sheets, once we have 1,000,000 records, how much does it cost? Once we grow, as we grow, what kind of tools or add-ons we may need and how much do they cost? Some examples that are typically ignored and many nonprofits do not think about them until very late in their journey is data backup and metadata backup, like the system backup itself, like the system itself doesn't fail, and then the data, if the system fails or the data remains. Think, for example, in an Excel sheet, you have a column that says first name, and then in the first name, John. John is data, first name is metadata. So metadata backup and data backup, 2 things are very important. Very important. And after we have some amazing data in the system that we use for analytics and we show it to our constituents and stakeholders and we share it with everybody, and some of them are public, this data becomes very important, becomes the heart of the business, and losing it might be a disaster. Losing this data might become a disaster, and only when we reach a point that it's a disaster. And some nonprofits actually do not think about this until a disaster happens. Some nonprofits, let me not say many, but some nonprofits and do not think about it until a disaster actually happens. Like somebody deletes a record by mistake. Somebody deletes many records by mistake. Thankfully, many systems do have some recycle bin and restore and whatnot. To some degree, it's some degree. But, let's not wait for a big problem to happen. I went on a tangent, but the idea here is that we need to factor in the costs that we're going to pay right now, and then the costs that we will be paying as we grow or as we use additional tools with this one. So this is the investment side of things. The other side of things is the return. Now, the return could come back in multiple shapes. One big one is automation. Are we saving time? Time at the end of the day translates to money. So if we're saving time from our staff, it means our staff, say, for example, the fundraising team. If the fundraising team spends less time entering data in the system or editing data in the system or reviewing data in the system, if they are spending less time doing this manual, boring type of tasks, they are spending more time actually fundraising, actually bringing money to the organization. So is this system going to help us save time? Is it going to help us automate some of this manual work? Is it going to, take away some of the tasks that we were doing ourselves, like automatically sending emails? Is it going to do additional things that we couldn't do before because of our limited capacity, limited time, limited resources? The return could be data insights. For example, right now we are getting donations from our website and from our social media posts and from SMS messages. So 3 different sources from which we're getting donations. And we just log these in a Google sheet or in an Excel sheet, and we just say donation. Does it tell us where it's coming from? It doesn't. Maybe it does if we put down the source. So let's say that we have 2 different landing pages on our website. 2 different landing pages on the website. One of them is for a campaign, and another landing page for another campaign. When we enter this and a donation came in, we might be able to actually manually do this, but if a system could automatically capture which campaign, like both of them are website, so the source might just say website, which is good analytics, but it's not the best analytics. Like a better analytics would be it's from the website. That's one piece of information. And then the other piece of information, which of those campaigns was the one that generated or resulted in this donation. How does this help? Like, how does this help us? It does help us to know which campaign was successful, which campaign was not successful. What did we do in this campaign that resulted in it generating more donations than that other one? Did we promote this one? Did we not promote the other? Did we share this one on our social media platforms, or did we not share the other one? We can then look at the data, look at the insights, and then look at what we did towards these campaigns to understand why the one behaved better than the other. When doing that, we're going to do 2 things. One, the one that was successful, we will double down on. The one that was not successful, we'll find out areas for improvement there to fix it. And if there is no areas for improvement, if it's like a bad thing altogether, we can stop doing that, stop wasting time or resources. That's very unlikely, but the more likely thing to happen is that we'll find out what the problem is and we fix it or improve it. But the idea here is that it's telling you information. So the return from all of this story is that the system is giving you information, analytics, insights that helps you make decisions, which eventually are going to drive revenue and stop us from spending time on less productive or less fruitful measures. Another thing we need to be paying attention to early on is the type of data that we currently have. If you're going to use a new system, the new system is going to be different from your existing system. Do not make the mistake of going for a new system and asking the developer or consultant to make it look the same, feel the same, do the same as it used to be in the old system. This is not the idea. Like, you're basically duplicating the system. You're just building the same system again in another platform, and you're paying for it. The idea is, you build a new system that actually addresses the points, the problems, and the pain points from the previous system. So which means the new system is going to be different from an architecture point of view. And when I say architecture, I mean that if you entered in the old system the data in this sheet, in the new system you might be entering this data in a new sheet. An example to maybe help clear this is when we enter a donation in an Excel sheet, we will put the name of the person and next to it the amount of the donation. But if you're using a system that has a database, you might have you will go to the person's table to create the person first, and then you will go to the donations table, which is a different table now. You see, in the Excel sheet it was just one table. In a database system, you are using 2 tables now. So you're going to 2 different places instead of just one. There are, of course, ways to make this an easier process, but just to understand that new systems might be different. So you create the person first in the person's table, and then you go to the donation and you link these donations to that person. This is something that we can look at in different videos. The idea here is that it's going to look different. It's not just one table, it's 2 tables. And this is just an example. There's going to be a lot of different things. The data is going to live in different places, and some of the calculations will happen differently. Maybe we were doing something manually in the sheets, calculating something manually. The system could potentially automatically make this calculation. In an Excel sheet, maybe we are using a formula to calculate something. But then something else is dependent on some other value, and we couldn't use a formula to achieve this, but a more sophisticated system could potentially auto-calculate this. The idea here is the system is going to be different. So our data is going to be migrated to that new system. So what we should be doing, and as a matter of fact, we should be doing this since we start the nonprofit altogether, since we as we start putting data in our first Excel sheet, and I have a video about populating the first Excel sheet. As we start with our first Excel sheet, we need to have clean data from day one. There are some measures and ways to build your data in a way that makes it easier for you to migrate from one system to another without so much hassle. One example for now is that, ID everything. I talked about this before. Like when you create a person, give that person an ID. Which is typically an email, but in case you have donors that do not provide an email, then you generate internally an ID for that person. And then whenever we have any other data in the system, we link that data to that person using that ID. If you might have it happens quite often, you might have actually 10 people in the system with the same name. How do you tell the difference between all of them? This becomes a problem when you're actually migrating to a new system. The data specialist is going to ask you, we have these 10 people and they all look the same. Which one is it? Are these duplicates? It's sad, but sometimes we don't know. The nonprofits themselves, they don't know. This happens when there is a lack of data. Sometimes we would know from the address, sometimes we would know from the phone number, sometimes we would know by who created it, when was it created, by the donations that were made. But I'm talking about situations where there is a serious lack of data in such cases. So when we have an ID for everybody, the chances for us not knowing who that person is, or confusing a duplicate, confusing one person for another, are very unlikely to happen. We'll actually have a more accurate data. And the ID part helps us link things together. When you use pretty much many systems out there, use what we call a relational database, meaning we relate one record or one row to multiple other records or rows. For example, one person is linked to multiple donations. So to do this, to create this relation between these two, we have to know from this list of donations who the donor is using that ID. And this is an example. This is applicable to everything in our Excel sheets. So having our data clean, ready for migration, not that we are going to migrate, but being clean is going to help us before we actually start using a new system. One measure that many nonprofits sadly ignore is actually data cleaning. Like we do not dedicate some time every week. It's never going to be every week. We do not dedicate some time every now and then, let's say every month or every 3 months or every 6 months even, to look at the data and do some cleaning. Remove some of the duplicates, find out some of the missing data points like emails or phone numbers and populate these, correct and standardize our addresses. Some people enter Michigan as a full word, and some people enter MI, some people enter United States, some people enter USA, some people enter US. So standardizing data and going through our database, it does take time and maybe days to actually do this, but it helps us learn about our system, learn about our data, standardize. And if we are using a system that allows us to add validations, we could actually enforce data quality for the future. For example, if we look at the data and we see that some people enter the state as a full keyword and some people enter it as just 2 letters, then we could add a validation that enforces two characters only, or do not allow two characters only if you want to go this way or the other way. Learning about our data and keeping our data clean makes it easier to move it to another system, makes it easier for us to read it and analyze it. And as a matter of fact, when you have a standard in place and then you run some analysis, if you want to know, for example, what state, from which state are most of our donations coming from? And when you do that, the system would treat MI and Michigan as two different states. So you will get a number for this state and a number for this other state, even though they are the same state. So it helps even without using a system, but rather an Excel sheet. If you were to perform analysis this way with standard data, it's going to give you much more accurate results. All right, I'll add one more thing, and that is because this is big and we usually do not pay attention to it until we get surprised. And I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier on this video, and that is what tools are we going to connect with this system that we're going to be building? Because many nonprofits think that system does everything. Let's go with Salesforce. Salesforce is the one that I use. That's why I'm speaking about that. Or let's say we're going to use HubSpot, or we're going to use Zoho or Odoo or whatever system, and we expect it to do everything. So some of these tools are actually very capable and they can achieve a lot. And even if they do, like a CRM is typically meant to be a CRM, like a database with validations and automations and some degree of analytics. It's very powerful. But, let's actually ask this question early on. From our business needs, we know what kind of things we need to do. And then we will ask, does this system meet those needs? If it doesn't, what systems would? And would those systems or tools integrate or work or connect with this system? When we learn about this, we might make the decision to actually go with that system, or maybe we find out that 90% of the tools that we need to use are not connected with this system, so it might not make sense for us to use it at all. Some examples are like the whole marketing and newsletters and stuff. So many nonprofits use Constant Contact, MailChimp, things like that. Salesforce, for example, doesn't have marketing out of the box. Like the base CRM does not offer marketing. There is a product called Pardot, and then another product, Marketing Cloud, that you may be using on top of Salesforce. The reason I am saying this is, like when it also ties to the part where we need to know about the cost early on. Let's use Salesforce. How much does Salesforce cost? X. From our business needs, we learned that we also need marketing. Does Salesforce offer marketing out of the box? No. With an add-on or with an additional product that is Marketing Cloud or Pardot? Yes. Then what's the cost of these additional tools? Alternatively, we may be using a tool that we have been using, like Constant Contact or MailChimp. Then the question is, does this tool connect with Salesforce? Or like the system that we are choosing. Again, I'm saying Salesforce because it is the system that I work with pretty much all the time. All right, let's pause there. I had quite a few questions, but maybe this is going to be another video. Thank you for watching. My name is Islam. I talk about systems and technology for nonprofits, and I'll see you in the next one.